if I'm going to make a go of this, I've got to find a way to do it that aligns with who I am and my values and what I thought my strengths were at that point in time. And that sort of started me on this lifelong journey of saying, okay, yeah, everybody has their own way of selling. It's great to be trained. It's great to be exposed to methodologies, but really those who, again, my experience work with many sellers and sales leaders, one characteristic that's shared about everybody that's been most successful is they found their own path.
Today's successful revenue leaders once started their careers just like you and I. They faced the challenges that their careers brought to them, they rose to the occasion, and became the leaders that we admire today. Join me as we explore the skills and stories that make a great leader with a pinch of vulnerability. Hello and welcome to Sales Therapy. I'm your host, Alper. Grab a chair. This is your exclusive invitation to the therapy room, as leaders are going to be sharing their career-defining moments, their secret tips and tricks in their arsenal towards success. And I promise we'll always end on a positive note. Today in the therapy chair, we have Andy Paul, who needs no introduction, which is why the introduction will take forever. So everybody bear with me. I'll do my best. He is the one who preaches building relations is the cornerstone of every good sales leader, that the best sellers are still human. Andy is the writer of Selling Without Selling Out, the host of many popular sales podcasts, including his newest hit, the Win Rate podcast. And with over 3 decades of sales experience, he's coached countless CEOs, entrepreneurs, and sales managers to accelerate their route to close one. We'll talk about his success, the joy, the pain, and the journey, as well as his predictions for 24. So welcome to Sales Therapy, Andy. How are you feeling today?
Alper, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. And thank you for being so open and joining this show, which is still in its infancy. It's only 15 episodes in. And how generous and kind of you to say, of course, man, I'll do it.
Oh, well, no, I mean, I think the more podcasts, the better, right? The more voices we get out there, the more perspectives and opinions we get from different places, then the better off we're going to be, because sales profession, if you will, and the thought leadership has been dominated, I think, by too small of a cadre of people over the years. And yeah, we need more voices. And so certainly I've been devoted to for many years with my podcast is to do just that.
I love that. And sometimes it's a bit of an echo chamber. And today, the other guest I had the privilege of having was Alper, and we were speaking like how sometimes the noises dumb us down and we start to keep it smart. So maybe we talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, well, there definitely is an echo chamber, and unfortunately, and you and I touched on this a bit before we started recording, there's certain industries that sort of dominate within the echo chamber, like SaaS, for instance. And yeah, that's just a small fraction of the world of sales. Yet,
exactly.
You'd read LinkedIn, you'd think it's everything, and it's not. So I started my first podcast explicitly back in 2015, explicitly with the idea of talking to non-tech audiences. But then who listens to podcasts is largely tech audiences. So we got some non-tech, but over time the audience became dominated by those types.
Yeah, we'll dive into that. I have some specific questions for you today, which I'm looking forward to. So let's follow our flow. Any good therapy starts with childhood and growing up. My first question will be, tell us about your younger years, your growing up years. And the reason I ask that is everybody goes into business mode and like, I just did that, did that. Like, let's get to know you first, the person that you became, and that's shaped by your, growing up experience, your values, the business person you are. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, having lived it, I mean, it seemed like pretty unremarkable childhood. I grew up in Wisconsin, the middle part of the United States. My father was an executive for Oscar Mayer. People familiar with Oscar Mayer is a large meat producer in the United States. Lived there most of my life until most of my childhood, until right before the start of my last year of high school, when my dad shows up, about 30 days before my senior year of high school, supposed to start, and says, we're moving to Tokyo.
Oh, wow.
And
I had the we're moving coming, but not Tokyo.
So within 30 days, we had to be there quickly by the start of the school year. And for me, that was really I think a huge inflection point in growing up, because instead of I think maybe if I'd stayed in Wisconsin, I might have, who knows what path my life might have taken. But spending a year attending American school in Japan, meeting just a whole different range of people than I was accustomed to meeting. And it just really broadened my horizons in so many ways that, yeah, I mean, for me, that was a fork in the road, perhaps,
Wow.
looking back on it.
Do
And
you ever go back to
yeah, I
Japan?
think I've been back a couple times, very briefly, but
Mm.
actually, my wife and my wife, who I met that year in high school
Oh wow.
in Japan,
Oh wow.
uh, yeah, we're yeah, planning a trip back, yeah, hopefully this year, actually. So this was a second marriage for both of us. We married other people and reconnected and got married in 2010. So we've not been back together for, yeah, 50 years practically. So yeah, we're
Oh
looking forward to doing that.
wow. Oh my. Okay, I just love my podcast. Like, how else would you know all these things about Andy? I love that. My co-founder is in Japan, and he married a Japanese lady. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. Okay, so Tokyo, and then you got back to the US, or was there more traveling around?
No, Tokyo, and then I mean, obviously we were there. We traveled some around Asia with my family, but yeah, went back to the States, went to school in California, and but I think it's just what I thought I could accomplish in the world. I think the perspective of that, because when you're in, a place like Tokyo and you're starting to meet the parents of your friends, and they're all very accomplished business people, and for the most part, and yeah, it just made me excited about things I could possibly do. But I really had no vision that I was going to go into sales. That was, I think, still like many people, sort of an accident.
Who has? Yeah, I think we a lot of people I interview and a lot of people I know, and including myself, I think there's a thing for sales in you, maybe extrovertism and blah blah blah. But then it happens by accident for many people. I don't know if you agree.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I graduated college with no career plans at all, and much to the chagrin of my parents. And sort of spent a few months after school. I worked at the university where I graduated for a few months, and then was running out of money. So the need to get a job was becoming to the forefront. And when I went to the career placement center on campus, yeah, the jobs that I thought I could do, I had a history major, so I had, no specific job skills whatsoever, and were all sort of sales jobs. And the big tech companies of the day were recruiting. I mean, these are for the most part names that no longer exist, but they were recruiting for these sales training programs, where
Mm,
they were going to hire hundreds or thousands of new college grads,
yeah.
and then sort of put them through a program and winnow out most of them over time, and those that were left would become, hope they thought, career sellers for their company.
Yeah, I was talking to I think it was John Hammond who told me when he first joined. I forgot, maybe Cisco or something. And he said, back in the day, we had those 6 month sales training programs where you would actually learn to do something and become rather than just being like thrown at. Was it one of those
Yeah,
experiences for you, or?
yeah. I mean, it was fairly structured for the first 6 months or so, roughly. So you came on board. It was a big company. It's called Burroughs. At the time, they're the second largest computer company in the world, and yeah, you'd go get sent to a 2-week training program
Mm-hmm.
initially, which was for sales training. And yeah, I mean, my reaction walking away from that was really questioning whether I really wanted to be in sales,
Ah,
because the behaviors exhibited by the
ah,
trainers and the training material were things, I've wrote about this in Sell Without Selling Out.
yeah,
It just sort of made my skin crawl, because that, the prototypical sales behaviors, the being the extrovert and so on, that just was not me. It is not me. I came back from that first train class, and again, I wrote about this in the book. Is the instructor? All the students go back to we worked in branch offices, so we went back to my branch office, which was in Oakland, California, and we had an evaluation from our instructor. We had to give our branch manager, and I handed mine to my branch manager and walked back to my desk in the sales floor, and he comes back a couple minutes later and says, "Hey, come to my office." I said,
mm.
"Sure." He said, "So how do you think training went?" I said, "Fine, I guess." He says, "Well, it's interesting. I'm looking at this evaluation from your instructor, and they think we should fire you." And I'm like,
Right away.
"What?"
Oh, wow. Okay, good.
And he said, "Yeah." They said, "You're too analytical to be any good at sales."
Oh
That was
God.
their evaluation. I was too analytical to ever
Mm,
be any good at sales.
mm,
And I'd already pretty much made up my mind at that point, is that, if I was going to, succeed at doing this, again, with no idea that I'd still be doing it decades later, I knew that I was going to have to sort of find my own way, right? That was going to, because I looked at what they're training people to do, and it's like, I can't act that way. I mean, I just can't, and I won't. So if I'm going to make a go of this, I've got to find a way to do it that aligns with who I am and my values and what I thought my strengths were at that point in time. And that sort of started me on this lifelong journey of saying, okay, yeah, it's everybody has their own way of selling. It's great to be trained. It's great to be exposed to methodologies, but really those who, and again, my experience working with many sellers and sales leaders, one characteristic that's shared about everybody that's been most successful is they found their own path. Right? They don't sell like anybody else. They've got their own way of doing it. And the fact is that, and I believe this absolutely, that everybody sells differently. There's a million salespeople in the world. There's a million different ways to sell. And that's an important lesson for people to learn, because we can, again, we are influenced by the things we read and the way we're trained, and we use various bits and pieces of those. But those people are most successful integrate those into let's call it a philosophy of how they sell and why they sell the way they do. And they constantly experiment. And I post about this week on LinkedIn is experimentation is so key. And it's, I think, one of the problems that has arisen in sales over the last, call it 2 decades, is as sales become more automated and sort of mechanized, is leaders want to take that flexibility away from sellers, right? Here's our playbook. Just use our playbook. Just follow these steps. Sure, as a framework, that makes sense. But, I'm going to approach it. I've got a different worldview than other people. I'm just going to approach that differently, right? I interact with humans differently than the next person, than you do or anybody else. I'm a unique person. The people I talk to are unique. Understanding that and working with the freedom that requires is, again, what sets apart, I think, the top sellers from the others.
So being too analytical, having empathy, being a human is not that bad after all, I guess.
Well, yeah. Well, and yes, but it goes deeper than that, right? Because it's always been the case, I believe. Some people don't believe that this is a more recent phenomenon, but I don't think so.
It's a comeback, I think.
It's always been, by saying that the phenomenon, I think that's always been the case is that people do buy from people.
Yeah, there you go.
Not companies.
Mm-hmm.
And increasingly these days I think this is more the case, but people want to think it's less the case. This is the irony. There's a great post that's put out by a gentleman named Santosh Sharon, who's COO of a company called Retention. And he went to G2 and he said, look, there are, and I don't know the exact numbers, but there are literally, he went by product category, conversational intelligence, hundreds of companies, products in that space, CRM, hundreds. And he went, sales engagement, hundreds, and not even low hundreds, high hundreds. And in those situations, the product is immaterial, right? If there are 100 companies, let's say, doing a conversational intelligence product, does anybody think there's anything really different between the products? No, there can't be. I mean, no one, if anybody had any sort of technological advantage, it's going to be quickly,
they catch up in 6
onto
months.
the others. Yeah. And so in the eyes of the customer, in the minds of the customer, and research has borne this out, research from Gartner and others, the products are all the same, virtually, and they're all priced roughly the same. So on
Andy,
what basis?
You're pissing out my co-founders by saying products are the same. As the sales guy, I am allowed to say that, but now you're telling them the products are the same? No, that's a big no.
They absolutely are the same, and companies have to. It's table stakes to have a competitive product at a competitive price, right?
Yeah.
That's what the customers expect. That's the minimum they expect.
Yeah.
And so then when they look at making their decisions, like Gartner had their study that came out in April of this year. It's saying, or April of last year, excuse me, forget what year we're in, is the number one factor, the number one most important factor in the minds of the buyers when they make their decision is trustworthiness. They had a list of 9 factors, and product and price were not on that list. So this idea of being able to connect with people, treat them as a human being, be curious, be interested in them and the things that are most important to them, to spend the time to understand what's really driving them, they become differentiators.
So can I ask one thing on that? So this is all good.
Sure.
You and I know it. So one of the things that I always had in my life, I'm a sales guy. So I used to be at Bain, Accenture, strategy consulting, smart, why did you become a sales guy? I don't know what perception of sales guy people around me had at the time, and I don't really have from my very close friends. And I think it's that probable stigma, like, always be closing. I don't
Right.
know, lack of empathy, whatever. And what they told you, basically, you're too analytical, right? So from there, coming to today, you want to make sure that you have all those skills, but at the same time, there is the board which is telling you you need a playbook, you need to be able to scale things, you need to automate things. And you have the VP of sales or CRO who has their playbook in their hand and like, you have to do this, that's the way we win. No, no, no. Which I think you already pissed off by saying, like, my playbook is my playbook, which I agree with. So how do you balance the friction between those two, like the autonomy versus the compliance to the playbook?
Well, I think that there are, just like there are a million salespeople that, each sell their own way, there's a million sales managers that manage differently.
Mm-hmm.
And as a seller, you have to find the right situation that's going to enable you to operate with the autonomy that you want. And I think this is a really important lesson for sellers, is your ability to succeed both in terms of working with the type of customers you want, winning the type of orders that you want, making the type of money that you want, having the type of life that you want. It's all based on the situation you put yourself in. And, there are situations, there are people that in one situation do so, and you put them in another situation, they become, 7-figure earners. And it's such an important lesson is as an individual contributor, you're hiring bosses, right? You're interviewing for a job, but really you are interviewing and hiring a boss. You have to look at it from that perspective. Is this a situation? Is this a company? Is this a culture? Is this a person I'm working with and working for who's going to enable me to achieve the things that I want to achieve in my life? No one cares as an individual. You have to just take this lesson to heart, is that no one cares about your success as much as you do. And you have to take ownership of it. And when I was coming up through the ranks, I was, even as a VP and working with boards and so on and CEOs, I wasn't easy, right?
I can tell.
I'm cooperative.
I relate to that a lot.
I'm a team player, but I question everything.
Yeah.
Somebody could give me an order, a boss give me an order, and I would say, well, let me think about it, right?
Yeah.
And because it was my career, right? It was my success that was on the line. And if I was going to fail, I was going to fail on my own terms. I think some of the beautiful things about selling is there's still this, you are an independent contractor to some degree, even though you're employed by a company. And we sort of lost this ethos that existed when I started in the career, which was, and my first boss made it very clear to me, after I come back from sales training and I was getting ready to be given a territory, he said, look, you're the CEO of this territory.
Yeah.
We have certain guidelines about operating with integrity and operating with strong degree of ethics. But, as long as you comply with those, you can pretty much do whatever you want in order to develop business out of this territory. And we've taken that away from sellers because of this automation and this need to have people comply to a process. And I like to say we've made selling small.
I just love it.
And
okay.
And I think it's a real shame because there's certain things that again we train people in. That people think this has always been that way, and it's not. It's really become prevalent in the literature about selling just in the last, I'll say, 20 years, about pain points. Everybody says, let's talk about pain points. Find the buyer's pain points. And I'll tell you, I've personally closed hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of orders, and I've never once asked a prospect about their pain points, because my customers and the way I position things is, what's the opportunity we're trying to achieve, right? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? They're looking at the upside of making a change, not, oh, I've got a problem, let's put a Band-Aid on it. And when you're so focused on small things like, well, what's your pain point? It's like, I'm not trying to fix a problem. I'm trying to help you gain market share. I'm trying to help you grow revenue. We're trying to help you become more profitable, whatever that dimension is. And that's what buyers buy. They buy, if you ask a buyer, you even ask sellers, I ask sellers all the time. So when your customer made the decision to buy from you, what were they buying? And oftentimes sellers say, well, they're buying my product. I said, no, they weren't buying your product. They're buying the vision of what success looks like using your product. That's completely different. They weren't buying your product. They're buying this outcome. You sell positive outcomes. You sell, I said, opportunities. And this is, just an example I give of how we've sort of made selling small, because we said, well, let's find a pain point. Well, we're not trying to fix a point solution. We're trying to help them achieve something bigger. And yeah, unfortunately, we're sort of gone down that path. And I said, it makes selling small. And if you look at the sellers in SaaS, we use SaaS as an example, it's a big range. Those who think about it as I'm helping the buyers achieve certain, go after certain opportunities and achieve these things, they tend to be at the top of the ranks. They tend to sell bigger deals because they're thinking that way with the buyer. It's the questions to ask the buyer, the insights to give the buyer that stimulate the buyer to think more broadly.
Yeah.
This is what we have to do as sellers.
So the one thing that resonated so much, like I remember myself coming out of consulting and like sitting in an office, I started doing a bit of selling at Accenture, and I just loved it because it had that autonomy, that feeling of this is my own business, my own territory, I'm building my own relations. And after that, any sales leadership role where I went, the people who got it really well was this is the only job where you're being paid to build your network, go and talk to people, make friends, understand their what their career aspirations are. Even at Flowla, I tell everybody I am paying you to build your network because that benefits me, but also the others. But when I say paying to build your own network, it is just go and talk to humans as humans. But I see your point. Like this predictable revenue model, it almost turns the human into a machine. Like 30-minute demo calls, jump to the next one. Did you do 8
Yeah.
today? I think that messed up a
And it
little.
results in this. Yeah, but it results in the situation we've seen where sellers, for the most part, even the ones at top of the ranks in less SaaS companies, have very low win rates. 20%, 30%, that's considered good, and 30% is considered good in SaaS companies oftentimes. Yeah, it's not, right? As a seller, your job should be is you should win more than you lose. That's simple. That should be the baseline standard that you achieve as a seller.
Can I ask what do people tell you when you tell them this? Your job as a seller should be your win rate should be higher than your loss rate.
You get pushback, certainly in the SaaS world, you get pushback, and it's insane. And the reason it's insane is, a gentleman I was arguing about on this with LinkedIn a couple weeks ago. He's saying, no. If your win rates are too high, then the sellers aren't being aggressive enough. I said, well, what do you mean aren't being aggressive enough? Well, they're not having enough conversations. I said, you mean conversations with people outside your ICP? I mean, there's a learning curve when you go to market, right? You got to find out what people are willing to pay you to do. But when you've figured that out, when you find your product market fit in your ICP, then what are you doing talking to people outside your ICP as a seller, right? You focus. That's how you win more, is you focus. You focus on fewer opportunities rather than more. You don't need to have conversations outside your ICP until you've maybe gained dominant market share in your ICP. You've exhausted it. You say, okay, we can see the end of the road here. We need to go to an adjacent market in order to grow the company. But until that time, when you're focused, there's just no excuse for low win rates. It's as I said, it's if your win rates, you've been in the market for a while and your win rates are 30% or lower, one of two conditions exists. Either you don't have product market fit, or you're just bad at selling. I said the second reason, you're just bad at selling. You're not doing type of discovery and qualification. You're not making the choices about who you should be selling to. That's really so important. As I like to put it, as a seller, you choose to win. When people say, what do you mean you choose to win? I said, well, it's your choice who you sell to. It's up to you. I mean, this is, again, a matter of autonomy. Sometimes it's taken out of the hands of sellers. But as a salesperson, you have to say, look, I am like the bouncer at the head of the velvet rope, letting people into a club. You choose who gets into your club. Not everybody gets in. Unless you have a strong idea as a seller why you're going to win this particular opportunity, why are you letting them into your pipeline? I sold in markets oftentimes where I maybe had 200 potential prospects worldwide. We were that focused. And we were still selective about who we sold to. And we grew companies because we got bigger deals, we got better deals that turned into referrals. Yeah, it's tempting. I understand as a seller, I've been in that situation myself, is you don't want to say, well, I don't want to be too narrow in my focus because I don't want to potentially miss opportunities that come. They all come with a price. And so you have to develop the acumen pretty quickly to say, look, is this an opportunity that we can win? If so, why are we the best situated vendor to win this opportunity? And you should be able to answer that question.
Go ahead. This is fine. I mean, yes, Okay, let's be the devil's advocate, the bad cop here. So
Sure.
this applies to my majority of my career, which is long sales cycles, complex selling, consultative selling, a handful of buyers, build relations, multi-million deals, da da da. But there's a lot of like high velocity, make 10 demos a day kind of products out there. Doesn't what you say contradict with their go to market? Like what are they supposed to do? Like when you have low ticket, it's all about the quantity, scalable model. The VC tells you is just get more people, even if the ticket size is small,
Sure. But
sell them more.
what's the key to velocity? The key to velocity is you're talking to someone who is an actual prospect for what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
selling.
yeah, yeah.
Right? You're not talking to adjacent markets. They are a fit. And we're going to determine that fit really quickly in a transactional sale. And if we need high velocity, because we're not going to be having conversations with people that aren't a fit. It's people want to have it all ways, right? You can't have it all ways. You can only have it one way, really, which is, we're in a low cost, high volume transactional business. I've been in those. We had to become even more focused on who we were selling to, right? Because that's how we ensured that we had a shorter sales cycle, that we required fewer sales touches to bring them from initial point of contact to an order. So you have to be even more disciplined. It's mind-boggling to me. People want to, I said, always keep their options open. And
Well, I mean, it's safe.
and
It's
the fact
easier.
is,
Yeah.
but the fact is that it's safer and easier to narrow down your options and work within something that's more tightly defined, because that will increase your odds of success. I mean, I encourage sellers to, think about their world this way. Think about everything you do in terms of probabilities, right? Every sales touch I have with a prospect. Is this increasing my probability of winning the deal or not? And if I can't answer that question affirmatively, then why am I doing it? There's just this inherent logic that escapes, that we're not training. Let's say it. I don't say escape sellers. We're just not training sellers in, and it oftentimes starts with managers that don't want to handcuff themselves, don't want to preclude their options. But those people who are succeeding most are more focused on a more narrow set of prospects until such time as they dominate it. Then they go to the next ones, the next category, the adjacent market.
Okay. I have 3 rapid fire questions for you that I want to definitely cover before our time runs out.
Okay.
Is that okay if I go with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What are the things you need to do to close a deal as a salesperson that you'll be a good salesperson? And what are the common mistakes that people do that results in them losing winnable deals, in your opinion?
Well, I think, and this is sort of aligned with what we've talked about here in the show today, is that people who are the sellers are most successful are those who make sure they really, truly understand the things that are most important to the buyer. And we encourage sellers these days in discovery to be very superficial, right? Here's the list of questions we need to ask. Here's the information we need to know. And I know people love Medic and MedPick, but I think this is part of the issue in the way that people are using it. It becomes very superficial. I'm going to gather this information. Well, knowing information is not the same as understanding the context of this information for the buyer. And too few sellers bridge that gap between knowing something and truly understanding it. And it's been my experience in every large deal I've worked throughout my entire career, again, spanning from 5-figure deals to 9-figure deals, is that there's always one thing that is most important to every buyer. And when you figure out what that one thing is, and who it's most important to, then your odds and probabilities of winning the deal go up fairly substantially. But it takes some patience, it takes persistence, it takes resilience, it takes building trust with the buyer. So you have the permission to ask some of the questions that you really need to ask and get permission to get the answers. I'll give an example of years ago, company I was working with, we were working with to the stateroom and for voice over IP and so on. And we're a small company, we're a startup, but we were really scrappy, and we got down selected to be the final 2 vendors, and the cruise line hands out this RFP, and this RFP was hundreds of pages of RFPs, and they had these right in the middle of the RFP. You're probably familiar with this as a consultant. They had these compliance tables. You have to tell us, do you comply to this feature, da, 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 da. And I was sitting down with the seller on the deal, and I said, look, here's the problem. There's more than 300 line items they want us to acknowledge. I said,
What do you
They're
really
not all
need?
equally important.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the one thing that's most important to them? And he didn't have the answer to that. So this cruise line was actually headquartered in Asia. So the next day he got on a plane and went back and had a meeting with the CEO, who was a large shareholder in the company as well. What we found out is that through all that, the thing that was most important to this individual was that he have 24/7 access to the real-time take from the onboard casinos. He wanted to know up to the minute how much money they're making on the onboard casinos, because that's where they're raking in all the dough on the cruises. So he said, "Oh, well, okay, that's pretty simple." What we did is then this was selling satellite communication system. We reconfigured the network so that there was hot standby for all the links from the ships. We had multiple links, but especially the one from the casino. That link was never, ever, ever going to go down. And we reshaped our whole proposal around that one thing. In fact, we ignored most of what was in the compliance tables to focus on one thing. That was the most important thing to the CEO, who was most important to. And yes, there was a committee of stakeholders and they had outside consultants and so on. But once we figured that out, that was it. We won.
Yeah.
That was
An
more than an $8 million deal.
An alternative scenario would be an alternative Andy going through the 300 items, waking up everyone in the company to validate every single point internally, and being the most hated salesperson ever, and then and not winning it.
Well, but
on top of it,
and not winning it. Yeah. Right. You have to. Yeah, I heard a great phrase recently. Actually, it's from Steve Martin, the comedian Steve Martin, who was in an interview said that, when you're on stage and you're building this presence, he says, you have to become undeniable. And I thought, what a great way, right, to talk about it. And as a seller, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to become undeniable. And that's what we did. None of our competitors, or at that point, there's only one more that is left, but they didn't go to the effort to try to find out what the thing that was most important to the buyer was, the thing that was really the upside for them that they wanted to manage. We did. And they were a multi-billion dollar company, and we were at that time less than $100 million in revenue, but that was it. And that's what you have to do as a seller, is you just have to get that level of understanding the buyer. I said that everybody's got one thing, but you'll find in the course of doing your discovery, there are multiple things, but you got to find those. So that's really the thing, is, are you taking the time to really, truly understand what's most important to the buyer and then help them get that?
Yeah. I guess the one thing they wanted to rip you off in that very first training, too analytical. By the way, analytical is not enough. Being smart alone is not enough. You have to care. You have to have empathy, curiosity, a genuine interest in helping somebody to do that, go the extra mile and have that presence, the acumen. Because once they know, why are you asking me this question? By the way, all those in playbooks and like all these discoveries where they have 10 questions to go through, it feels so terrible being on the other side. It's like an investigation. It's like an endless list of questions you answer. You don't even have a clue. Why are you asking me this? Nobody teaches these people guided discovery. So much to fix.
Yeah.
So much to fix.
Well, and it doesn't lead anywhere, right? So you have to think.
Yeah. Why am I answering all these questions? Like, what?
You have to ask yourself the question as a seller. We've seen all the studies have come out from, I think, Gartner and Forrester and so on, saying, look, 80% or 75% of B2B buyers find no value talking to sellers, right? And they would prefer, quote unquote, they prefer to do it on their own, which is not true in terms of prefer to do it on their own. And it's not true that 75 to 80% find no value with sellers. It's probably closer to 100. But anyway, you have to ask yourself, if you're having a conversation with a buyer and they're on record saying they don't want to talk to a salesperson, why are they talking to you? It's because they need to, right? If there's something you don't want to do, but you end up doing it, it's because you need to. What do they need from you? Well, they're trying to make a decision to make a change in their business. Oftentimes they need you to ask them questions that they don't think to ask themselves, to give them a way to think more broadly and deeply about the problem they're trying to solve or the opportunity they're trying to achieve. That's what they need you for. I mean, there's a whole theory of strong ties and weak ties. Right? Is that we need to have, if we're in an organization and we're thinking about making a change in the business, making a decision to do something, and we're out collecting the information, the sociologists say, look, we all have strong ties. Now, the problem with people that have strong ties is the sociologist says you all know the same information. So you all know redundant information. The reason you need to talk to salespeople, people you have weak ties with, because they bring you the perspectives and the insights that you don't have yourself.
Yeah.
And there was a study post-pandemic from MIT where they were trying to do a study about how often do people really need to be in the office together in order to sort of share these insights and new perspectives. And it was all from the perspective of strong ties and weak ties. So this is when you're having this conversation as a buyer, it's because they need to talk to you. Well, what do they need from you? What's the help they need from you in order to continue to make progress toward making their decision? And if you can frame it that way as a seller, then it's like, okay, I'm not just asking these superficial discovery questions more. I need to understand what the need is here.
What is it really? Yeah. And some of the need.
What do they need from me?
This is what, after a year and a half of building Flowland, researching all these areas, like what do buyers want, what do buyers need? I mean, at the end of the day, they want to be handheld, they want to feel safe, they want to feel they're doing the right decision by going ahead with you, etc. But a lot of it is happening async. A lot of it is happening internally when you're not in the room. A lot of
it's always been that way.
But at the end of the day, they want the human interaction because, to be honest, they want three things based on our research. One is autonomy. Like they want to be on their own to make the decision, but they also want availability, which is like when I want to ask the question, when I need this information, it should be available. I shouldn't be chasing you. And the other one is authority, which is enable me, you seller, enable me as the buyer or the champion or whatever, to make sure that I'm making the right decision, to make sure I'm educated, to make sure I'm educating others, influencing others. So help me to actually help you sell this product internally because I need it. If I need it.
I mean, I largely agree with that. I mean, I think that I would say most sellers don't understand, and I've written about this in my last book. It's going to be in my new book as well. Is look, you're into an environment where you're selling into an environment where people are pressed for time for whatever reason, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's always been the case. Buyers have always been busy. This is not new. I mean, somebody's trying to make the argument the other day with me is that buyers today are busier than they were 20, 30 years ago. And I'm like, it's just not the case. First of all, yeah, we don't go down that road. But anyway, so people are busy. They don't have endless amounts of time to spend investigating and evaluating and researching what they're going to do, right? So when that's the case, what happens is, and this is somebody won a Nobel Prize, is largely based on this work, a gentleman named Herbert Simon. He said, look, created this thing called the theory of bounded rationality. He said when people make decisions, they have three constraints. Everybody does. Don't have unlimited time. They don't have access to unlimited information, nor do they have a perfect understanding of all the factors at play. So when that's the case, he said, when people make decisions, and this is not 100% of people, but certainly the majority of people, when they make decisions, they look for a solution to the problem that satisfies their requirements and suffices to enable them to achieve their most important goals. And he created a word, he put together, he goes, that's satisficing.
Nice, I love it.
And what happens is, as he found out, is that when people find the solution it satisfies their requirements, suffices to hit their desired outcomes, they make their decision. And it's called the good enough decision. This is good enough. Right? It meets our requirements. It suffices to hit our desired outcomes. And yes, we could invest more time to look at more options. But the fact is, A, we don't have the time. And B is what we'd find is that there's no solution that's so much better that it's worth the additional investment of our time to keep looking. And this is what your customers do all the time. And so your job as a seller is to be able to help your buyer. First of all, get out of your head that your buyer is trying to make the absolute best decision, because they're not. I mean, there's, as Simon pointed out, there are some people called maximizers, they're the opposite of satisficers. They will look at every opportunity, every option, that exists, every alternative to satisfy themselves to make the absolute best choice. Most people don't. Your buyers have these constraints. They don't have unlimited time. They don't have unlimited access to information or a perfect understanding of it. They're looking for your help to get them to the point of saying, look, this is good enough. Let's go. And if you can tap into that as a seller, if you can harness into that as a seller, and I wrote about this in Sell Without Selling Out. There's milestones you hit along the way that enable you to show that you're getting to that point. Wow, that's gold. And the way you do that is not by consuming more of your buyer's time, but it's becoming more effective and at helping the buyer, so you can actually help them make this progress with consuming less of their time and less of your own time.
I mean, it's actually, first of all, you gave me two real new vocabulary for which I'm thankful. But I think the one I love most is the good enough decision. Like, amazing. And actually, it lights, like the light bulb in my head goes, this is why we're building Flowla, to help them make the decision in an easier, frictionless, shorter amount of time. Let's get to the decision. Let's get to close one, easier for the buyer. And I think I'm going to definitely take it and use it, if you don't mind. The good enough
Sure. Well,
decision.
but and the good enough decision is this interesting thing. It's like all decisions. It's
Yeah.
driven by emotions, right? That's good
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's also coldly rational as well, because what you're saying is, let's make this decision now instead of continue to invest our time to look at other alternatives and so on. Now, this happens even within the context of a buyer's process that doesn't automatically stop, right? Is when they decide use suffice, it may still take you some time to actually get the order. But this is where your instincts as a seller come into play. Is I knew when that happened with my customers.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know at the time it was happening. And I remember having a conversation with the boss, and I was winning these deals. I was getting the sense I was winning these deals before we were getting the order well in advance. And it's not
Yeah.
like they were actually telling me stuff yet, but I knew that I'd got it. And we'd go back and talk to them afterwards. Exactly what's happening is they said, yeah, good sort of said, yeah, you're the one. But we couldn't just stop it. We still had to go through our process
Yeah, of
internally.
course.
You want to get to that stage. And so as a seller, and again, I talk about sell without selling out, is there's a way you operate to help the buyer get to that point with you before they get to that point with any other vendor. And if you can do that, you've made better use of their time, right? They've been able to make more progress with you in less time than with other people. That is reflected in a buying experience that's substantially better.
And you're a friend for life then, not just a seller.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's based on building that trust and credibility.
There you go. Yeah, of course.
So it can be very powerful. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, so I got me down that point, because I think it's something that sellers can do that gives them a fair, I don't say control necessarily, but get more control over what's happening.
Yeah.
If you can shape the way you're selling to help the buyer get to that point before they get to it with, as I said, another vendor.
Before we run out of time, I want to also ask your opinion about our space a little bit, like buyer enablement, because these are obviously very apt for what we're trying to build. I mean, I started building it to solve my own problem, which was these complex sales. Lots of stakeholders, decision making, help them make their decision easier, blah, blah, blah. Make it easier on them, really. Because actually, let me take that a second back. All my life, I was a seller, and I was selling and feeling the pain of selling. Then I became a buyer, and I started feeling even more pain, because buying was even worse than trying to sell. And then, Flowla. What do you think about our space now? Buyer enablement, digital sales rooms, all these Flowla. You've had a little bit of experience with it.
Right.
What's your take on them?
Well, I think that, I hope this is okay with you, but I think that...
Yeah, say whatever you want.
I think there's two things. Yes, there's enabling the buying process, but first we have to enable the decision process. And those are distinct in my mind. Because there are things you do to buy that are outside the things you do to make the decision about who you're going to buy from. And so, I think certainly, and I was in the room at Gartner when they first unveiled their, in 2019, their 2018, their buyer enablement study with the famous spaghetti diagram. When you looked at that diagram, you said, well, look, right at the heart of it, there were these 4 jobs. And I don't think there's 4, I think there's 3, but that's the decision. And we need to be able to enable the customer to be able to make the decision to make a change, as well as help enable them with buying. Because, things like contract negotiation, that's not part of making the decision.
Yeah. It's just the hustle they have to go through.
I mean, if you're in contract negotiations with a customer, again, my experience is they don't go into contract negotiations with multiple companies. They do it with one. Now, it doesn't mean you've won the deal yet. You still got to finish that part. But they made the decision to go with you.
Yeah.
But until we get better at helping them make the decision to go with us, enabling the buying part is sort of secondary, right? It's a task of secondary importance. So I first have to get them to agree that we are the best company for them to work with. So I look at it sort of two frames as, both important, but one has to happen for the other to happen.
Got you. Well, you know what? I probably agree with 80% of that. The rest of it we can talk on your show next time we meet.
Sure.
Nice segue to the closing remarks. Andy, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for joining me Any closing remarks before we're
thanks for having
already
me on.
way
This has been
over
a lot of fun.
time.
Sorry about that, but you get me going.
I'll tell you
I get
something
going.
about it. Yeah. Well, any closing remarks, and I'll tell you something about it.
No, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. The reason I say we're over time is because I'm supposed to be a good therapist who keeps us on time and who needs to cut us on time. But today it was too good that I couldn't do that, so I made a bad job of that. But thank you for being with us. This was a great conversation. I'm looking forward to the next. And
Yeah, likewise.
Absolutely. So that's a wrap on this episode of Sales Therapy. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. I thank Andy Paul very much for doing the honor of joining us on this conversation. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And looking forward to the next one. Bye.